And we're up to chapter 28, A Smelly Job. Hello friends, welcome back to Storytime at Riverwood Cabin. I'm Rosie Boom and I'm reading to you from Where Lions Roar at Night, the fun and adventures of a pioneering New Zealand family. This is the first book in the Barn Chronicles series and we're up to chapter 28, A Smelly Job. I should have dug a long drop, Dad told Mum the next day at breakfast. The composting toilet can barely cope with the 8 of us, let alone all the visitors we have. Millie glanced over at Dad. From the look on his face, she guessed the toilet must have started leaking again. I'll help you this time, offered Mum, but even as she said it, her nose crinkled up at the thought. Millie and the boys shot outside to have a game of soccer. They didn't want to be anywhere around when the toilet was cleaned. Millie was glad she didn't have to do grown-up jobs like that. Clearing the table was bad enough. "Look at Mum," giggled Jacob a few minutes later. Mum had appeared on the porch and was putting on her gumboots. On her nose was a bright blue peg. Millie burst out laughing. "You look ridiculous," she called up. Mum looked up and replied, "Needs must," in a funny sounding voice. Then she walked determinedly towards the bathroom. She didn't last long. Millie saw her come out rubbing her nose. A bright red mark glowed on either side of it. "I don't know how Dad can do it. What a horrible job." Millie grinned. "Weren't you going to help him?" "I tried." Mum gave her a defensive look. "Anyway, I've done my fair share of that sort of work in my nursing." Ellie looked up from her book. "Now I know why I don't want to be a nurse." Dad appeared half an hour later. "I'm glad that's over," he said, "until next time." Then he went outside whistling a merry tune. Millie watched him walk away. She couldn't believe how cheerfully he did those terrible jobs. She'd never heard him complain, not once. Now, if she had to do a terrible job like that. That afternoon, Mum suggested they head up to Auntie Penny's and go for a ride. Millie and Ellie shot outside to get their riding boots on. They'd had a few wonderful rides over the farm and through the forest in the last week. Mum had been getting used to Pharaoh and said she felt like a teenager again. The horses were happy to see them. Pharaoh came cantering over to the gate when Mum called him and nuzzled around looking for a treat. Peony followed at a more sedate pace. Ellie and Grace caught Seth and Eva and met them at the stable. Mum looked up at the sky. "Looks like there's some rain around, but we should manage to get a ride in." Pharaoh jittered around. "He thinks all his Christmases have come at once," said Mum as she swung into the saddle. "I hope he behaves again." They set off up the track. Pharaoh quickly took the lead and Mum had to keep reining him in to wait for the others. "Let's just take it quietly and let me stay in front. He gets pretty excited if someone goes ahead." They rode around the mountain, winding up and up. The air got chilly and the dark clouds seemed to roll towards them faster and faster. Millie started to shiver. She wished she'd listened to Mum and brought a jacket. Grace opened the gate that led to the radio mast on the very top of the mountain. "Look at that view," exclaimed Mum. "You can see the sea." But Milly didn't want to look. She felt cold and miserable. A crack of thunder echoed in the distance. She looked up at the angry sky. The storm seemed to be chasing them. They still had a long way to go down the mountain before they got home. Rain began to sting her bare arms and face. A sheet of lightning flashed across the sky. "Mum!" she called. "Wait for me!" Pharaoh had reached the very top, and his neck was arched and his tail high as he pranced around. He didn't want to wait for anyone. Ellie and Seth went cantering past Milly and Peony. The rain was bucketing down now, and the reins felt slippery in Milly's cold hands. The sharp wind was biting through her wet top, and she couldn't stop her teeth from chattering. She looked down into the valley. She could see the sheets of rain moving across the hills. Every now and then, lightning zigzagged through the sky. "I'm freezing," she mumbled to Mum when she reached the top. "I know, so am I, but what an adventure." All 4 horses were steaming in the rain. Another flash of lightning crackled across the dark sky. A deep rumble followed it seconds later. "It's getting closer," said Ellie. "Will the lightning hit us?" Milly felt scared. Just the week before, a local man and his horse had been killed by lightning. "No, it's still a long way off," answered Mum in a cheerful voice. "We'll be okay, but we need to keep going." The horses were keen to set off down the mountain. The wind was behind them now, and they slid and skidded down the steeper parts with their haunches tucked under their bodies. Once they got further down, Mum and Pharaoh led the way onto a narrow track that wound through the pine trees around the side of the mountain. Milly watched Pharaoh begin to slip and slide down the muddy track. She looked at the steep slope to the left of the track and felt her stomach churn inside. Peony was starting to fret at being left behind. "Go, Milly!" shouted Ellie from behind. She started down the track. She felt her stomach lurch as Peony began to slide. "Mum!" she screamed. "Mum!" Mum spun around in her saddle and saw Peony sliding down the muddy track. "It's all right, Milly," she called back. "Just let her have her head." But Milly couldn't. She was sure Peony would start galloping down the treacherous track. She was terrified they would fall and roll down the side of the mountain. She heard Ellie saying something to her from behind, but she couldn't make out what it was over the wind. Peony lurched forward and her head went down low. "Mum!" screamed Milly. "Jump off her, Milly. Let her go by herself." Milly could just make out Mum's voice. She jumped off and quickly grabbed the reins. Peony was sliding now, and Milly ran beside her on the higher side, trying to hold her. "Just let her go," called Mum again. But Milly wouldn't. She was sobbing now, and her tears felt hot on her cold cheeks. She stumbled and slid beside Peony. Behind her, she could hear Seth snorting as he made his way down the track. Peony came to a sliding stop beside Pharaoh at the gate. Milly put her head against Peony's steaming side and cried. "Are you all right, darling?" asked Mum. "That was a bit scary, wasn't it?" Milly nodded. She felt angry at the storm, angry at the bitter wind and the freezing rain. She felt like shouting at them and telling them to go away. Ellie and Seth slid up to the fence, and then Grace appeared on Eva. "That's the worst part over, thank goodness," said Grace. "We'll be home soon." Millie got back on Peony and followed Mum through the gate and across the next paddock. The horses all had their heads down and their necks curved away from the wind. Even Pharaoh had stopped his dancing and seemed to be looking carefully at where he was putting his feet. Mum turned around and called back to Millie, "Nearly there, darling. You can have a hot shower soon at Grandma's and get into some of her clothes." Millie didn't say anything. She just wanted the wretched ride to be over. When they finally reached the bottom, she felt like crying again, this time with relief. Mum took hold of Peony and said she'd put the horses away while Millie went in and had a shower. G&G were waiting for her when she arrived at their place. "We saw you set off up the mountain," said Grandpa, "and realised you must have got caught in the storm. Are you all okay?" Millie nodded. She still felt like she might cry again if she tried to talk. But after a hot shower and a steaming cup of Milo, she felt a lot better. And when she heard Mum tell G&G that it had been a real adventure, she had to agree. By the time they reached the barn, the thunderclouds had moved away across the hills and the sky had turned a soft eggshell blue. The setting sun lit up the retreating clouds in pink and gold. All over the land, a delicate mist was rising from the ground. Everything looked mysterious and strange. Millie saw two pukekos take fright at something in the mist. They made a laboured takeoff and flew awkwardly towards the kahikatea tree, their long orange-red legs dangling behind them. Inside the barn, the fire in the homewood stove glowed the same orange-red, and Kate had a roast chicken sizzling inside the oven. Dad laughed when he heard about their adventure. "For goodness sake, didn't you see the storm approaching, Rose?" "Of course I did," replied Mum indignantly. "But I thought we could beat it. By the time it broke, we were right at the top of the mountain, and there was only one way down." Then she smiled to herself and added, "But you should have seen Pharaoh. He was magnificent."